So I wanted to ask you, just to shift the last part of the conversation a little bit to a user, right? Because I always say, like, people say to me, like, where is leadership? Why don't we have leadership in the community and this and that? And I'm like, where did you pray today? And they're like, I prayed at this masjid. And I said, what did you eat for lunch? And they're like, I had some chicken, this and that. And I'm like, do you know the fact that you're living in the UK, you prayed in that masjid is there today because of leaders? That halal chicken you're eating is because someone stood up and said, you know what? I'm going to ensure that in my community we have halal chicken, right? Yeah. So there's like leaders everywhere. So I see LaunchGood as being an amazing tool for someone who thinks, you know what? My community, it needs help. It needs something doing. I don't have the cash for it. I don't have the money for it. But this is an avenue for me to do something. And I was speaking to this guy in Nigeria. He wanted to do a LaunchGood campaign. He came across some of the work we do, and he just wanted my advice. So I just set up a call with him. I gave him some advice around LaunchGood, and then he went out and he raised money for this Islamic school that he's got there. Amazing. Like someone in the middle of Nigeria raising money from someone else. So my question to you is really like, imagine I'm that person, I'm that user now, who has that element of leadership. I know there's a responsibility in my community. I want to do something. I want to go out there. I want to do it on LaunchGood. But I'm kind of worried. I'm like, what if I go public with like wanting to raise $10,000? I don't do anything. I'm going to be like a failure. I want to do something. I've never done anything like this before. Like, what do you advise? What do I do in this situation?
That's a great question. So that pressure is positive pressure. Okay. Right? So sometimes I even encourage people to do all or nothing funding, which is really intense, because then it's like, if you don't hit your goal, you get zero.
Wow.
People are like, why would I do that? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, why don't you want to do like, that's so stressful. I'd be like really nervous. I'm like, exactly. You're going to work really hard at it. And I think it's one of the beautiful things about crowdfunding is it holds you, there's this like public accountability, right? Like you don't want to fail. And you also don't want to be a fraud, because it's like, it's not a great place to be a fraud. It's just too public, right? It's much easier to just steal people's money in private. I think what I always communicate people to is that in crowdfunding, the crowd comes before the funding. And you really have to think about it as a publicity campaign before you think about it as, just raising money. And I know you guys do this really well. It's like, sometimes you need to spend months preparing for this. You got to make a video. You got to learn you got to learn how to communicate some grand vision in just a few minutes, maybe even a few seconds of time. That's all you have to get people's attention today, And so I think, again, that going through that whole exercise is really valuable. And if someone does that, then raising the money actually kind of starts to become the easy part to it, because you've already learned how to do the elevator pitch, how to ask people. And that's good, because ultimately, no matter what you're building, the money is just one small piece, a very small piece. It's like a temporary thing you have to overcome versus all the other challenges you have to achieve your vision.
Well, why do you say money is the small thing? Because a lot of the time, especially like everyday people out there, they kind of see it that I could do anything if I had the money, right? Whereas you're saying, well, money's only a small part. So just explain that a little bit.
It takes so much more work to really think through and manage a project than it does to just I think activate it with the dollars that are needed. So let's say you want to build a masjid, right? So if people are looking at it like, oh man, I need $1 million so I can actually build this masjid. Well, even after you get the $1 million, you're going to need to fill that masjid. You're going to need to get an imam. You're going to need to have programming that makes the masjid relevant. You're going to need to figure out a way to develop, have monthly revenue stream to pay for the electricity and the water and this and that. And to do that, you can't do it all yourself. So now you got to have a board and you got to find people on the board. And then you realize actually most of that stuff you can even do before you get the $1 million. You can find an imam. You can start praying even if you're renting someplace. You can build the board, because you're going to need all that in place. So then you realize, I thought I needed $1 million. Actually, I needed all this stuff around it to make sure that I'm a steward of that $1 million once I get it.
Amazing. And I guess that kind of stuff does better, isn't it? Where if someone sees that you've taken some action, you've done some work, and now you're trying to take it to the next level, right? What do you think and this kind of like towards the end of it now, because I know I don't want to take too much of your precious time. I mean, when it comes to it, what have you seen that people have done really well with crowdfunding campaigns? What are like the tips, or what are the big mistakes or errors that you kind of advise against? Like, you've got so much experience, you're viewing. Sometimes I look at platforms, and that's one thing I really, really wish I could see into, especially as marketeers, right?
Yeah.
Because we're like, imagine if I could see all the campaigns. I know I would do the connections, I would do the dots, and I would work out this is working, and it was so powerful with the data, right? Yeah. So like, what are the kind of things that you've really found to work really well?
I try to boil it down to two big things. If someone really wants to have a successful campaign, they got to make sure they cover these two aspects.
Okay.
The first is you have to touch someone's heart. If you can't open their heart, they're not going to open their wallet. That's Amazing. Just the truth of it, right? So it can't be logical. You really have to emotionally tap into somebody. Yeah. And then the second piece is you have to be credible. You have to make people trust that if they give you their dollar, like, you're going to execute as you told. As you say you are. And I think a really good example of this, we were just recently talking with someone over there in UK, beautiful photojournalist. His name is Peter Sanders. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Peter Sanders, but he became Muslim, I want to say in the 60s,
wow.
maybe the 70s. And right before he became Muslim, he was photographing the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Cat Stevens, Jimi Hendrix. Yeah. This guy was like the top of his game, working for Rolling Stones, etc. And, then he became Muslim, and he would travel the world, and he would meet all these great sages in Islam and scholars and teachers. And he realized, like, people have no idea who these are. Like, they think the rock stars out there are the Rolling Stones. It's not. Like, we have these ulama, that really, like, just incredible, and they actually reflect the true Islam, and at that time it's like, or even this time it's like, oh, Muslims are terrorists and this and that, and it's like, no, that's not who Muslims are, and so he started photographing them. He's been photographing these guys for 40 years.
Wow.
40 years. And he went to put together this incredible book of all the people he's photographed his whole lifetime. And he went to a publisher, and publisher's like, you gotta, like, we'll print it, but we're not going to pay you for this. We'll pay you the royalties and stuff, but you got to generate £50,000 if you want us to print this. And he was devastated. He was really worried. He's like, that's a lot of money. Like, how can I bring this to life? And he came to LaunchGood. And this was 2 years ago at Dhul Hijjah. And he asked if we could raise it, and I said, I think so. You're Peter Sanders. You've got this incredible reputation, decades. Yeah. Like, you are the most credible to print a book like this, right? And so he opened up. He made this beautiful video with Sami Yusuf interviewed him for this video. So, and he's talking about the project, and you can see the faces, and that's something that's really important. People connect by seeing faces. And you got to make that human connection. So anyway, he put together this video, he put together this project. He raised £50,000 in 7 days.
Wow.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. And now, 2 years later, the book just went to publish. I just finished publishing, and like, you can actually order a copy of the book now. And now he's coming to the US, and he's doing this whole global tour with the book. And it's just like, we're talking to him yesterday, and subhanAllah, he was like thanking us. I was so embarrassed. I'm like, why are you? It's like, we should be thanking you, like, you gave us the opportunity to be part of your life's work. And so, alhamdulillah, that's what you talked about earlier. Like, it's not fair, honestly. Like, we get to be part of so many good projects, and I just feel like it took a lot of work to get the ball rolling, but now it's just rolling. It's rolling, and we get to be part of so many great causes across the world. Allah is very generous, alhamdulillah.
And it's actually a wonderful thing that helps you to grow as an individual, because I know you've like been we haven't talked so much about it today, but you've been a really good connector for us, like introducing us to some really amazing organization, amazing people. And just by spending time hearing their stories, I'm seeing these organizations and these shuyukh and these entrepreneurs just coming out of the woodwork, people I never imagined like even existed.